Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. And I'm really excited about today's guest, Max. He's a gentleman born and raised in Vancouver. He's lived throughout the world and then he's back to the Pacific Rim. But he is the founder and CEO of Amplify, and he's also a independent financial advisor with more than 10 years in the industry. So today's talk is going to be all about finances, financial literacy, financial freedom, and I'm happy to welcome him to the show. So welcome.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, I know we had gotten connected, and talk to us about your story, how you got into the financial services, and we'll get into what the work that you're doing now.
A great question. Well, back around the turn of the century, I followed a lady to Korea from Vancouver, and that didn't work out in terms of our relationship, but did meet my wife there, which was awesome, and fell into English teaching, which a lot of people kind of do if they speak English and they live in Korea and Japan. And I love the teaching part, especially young kids. English got a little bit boring after a while because it's very basic conversation that you're teaching, like, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. Repeated all day long. So I really also realized at the same time I hadn't learned about finances as a kid. In fact, when I wanted to buy a condo in Vancouver, which has some of the world's most expensive real estate, this was 30 years ago when I wanted to buy it, my dad said that was crazy. Yeah, I didn't come from my parents were hardworking and they were very well-meaning and they raised me very well and did everything that they could for me, but they didn't really have a good understanding of money. So I wanted to learn about that. And I got into stocks around the crash in 2008. That was really interesting. Then I said, hey, I want to do this full time. So I ended up going back to Canada with my family, working at a big bank for about 8 years. And the big bank was great because I met tons of people, built that network, and learned all about the industry. At the end of the day, I felt that, banks doing what they're doing, they're transactional. They're focused on making those sales and getting you to sign here. And so I really wanted to put my clients and people first. And that's why 4 years ago, I migrated to independent practice. So what I do now is I focus on that education, really getting to know people first and seeing how I can help them. And then if there is a product that I'm going to help someone with, that will come. But I don't start with that. I start with the person. Does that make sense?
I love that, and because just like doctors are, for lack of a better term, being commoditized. And, so you have to find a way to differentiate yourself, create a category of one where you're competing against yourself, not against other people. And so same thing with financial advisors, with robo advising AI, everything's going to zero. So you have to figure out ways to stand out. So, and some of those you advocate socially responsible investing.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Well, why do you invest generally? Why do people want to invest?
Well, mostly people want to invest either for, their future, for their kids' education, maybe for a house, maybe to build a company, usually for something they want to put down the money now for a later future payout.
Exactly. You want that money to grow. And then that's the main reason for investing. So socially responsible investing is doing that in a way that's not only good for your portfolio, but the other two P's as well. And those two P's are the planet and other people. So you invest in a way that helps all stakeholders in this world. And I'll give you an example. There is a mining company in the Andes in South America mining gold, and they're in the middle of nowhere. And what they did is they went to this school that's very rural, and they connected that school to the grid, and they gave every kid a tablet. So now all these kids are connected to the internet with Wi-Fi they didn't have before. Now, obviously that cost the gold company money out of their bottom line. But hey, lo and behold, 6 months down the road when that mine is in full operation, you don't have indigenous protesters blockading that mine saying, hey, you cut us out of the profits, where's our fair share? So why did that company invest in the community? Because that's actually their values. They care about the community. That's part of their mission statement. And funny enough, it dovetails with the profits because it helps that company end up making more money. And if you just think about it this way, like what kind of company is going to prosper in this environment? A company that takes care of the environment and communities, or a company that doesn't? And there might be a short-term gain by, foregoing the environment or not taking care of the local people, but in the long term, it'll bite you back. And that's really what people want nowadays. People want, they don't just want to go to Starbucks and have a coffee. They want to have a coffee that they know is supporting a farmer with a fair price for their coffee beans. And that's how a lot of the younger generation are thinking. And that's the way investments are going. And you can see that big transition out of the carbon-based energy, the oil and gas, and the coal into the green energy, and it's only accelerating. So really, that's the smart place to put your money as well for your own pocket, because that's what's going to keep growing.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because my wife and I were reminiscing over the weekend, and we were talking about when the whole world shut down and the air cleaned up and like the weather got better and nature was like so much happier. And it's just so interesting how the destruction that we humans put on the environment. So it's always interesting, and a lot of the Gen Z and the younger generation, they'll actually pay double for a coffee if it helps support the environment or helps support social causes. They're more geared towards towards what you call socially responsible investment. And then you're also advocating financial literacy, and you're using finance as a power tool to help give back more to charity. This is something not commonly, a lot of times it's like the bottom line, the P&L, but talk about the power of giving back.
Excellent. Well, I make giving back a big part of my practice, and that's because I started off as a pretty selfish kid and really always thinking about me, myself, and I, and what can I do to make my world better, and not really having gratitude for what's around me and for all the gifts that I had. And then slowly my eyes, I would say, start to open, especially after I had kids and they started to grow up, and just saw how lucky I was that they were healthy. And then, you see other people's kids, they might not be that healthy. Like it could be in the children's hospital, or in our city of Vancouver, we have a huge homeless issue with a lot of people just living on the streets. There's addiction, and
that's true.
So I really want to make that a big part of what I do is that giving back and taking care of that community around us, because we're all in this together. And so what I do is, let's say that you were a new prospect and we were connecting for just an intro chat. At the end of our chat, to thank you for your time, what I would do is offer a give back to your favorite charity. Whether or not you become a client, that's just what I want to do, and that's how I run my show. And that gives me a great chance to learn about what's important to you, because I've learned about so many different causes, from say battered women to muscular dystrophy to homelessness and addiction to mental health. I mean, there's so many different causes out there, and you learn about the struggles that people went through with their own families or their friends. So that's a big part of what I do. And I would say the power tool, well, what do charities need? They need money, right? Because a lot of people will say, and kind of don't get me started on this, but well, you could say, like, have you heard that criticism that charities shouldn't be paying their staff? That's one thing that comes up, right?
I mean, there is for example, in Houston, we have a mega church, and there's a pastor, and I think he's making like 20, like it's an egregious amount, and he's gonna come under fire for that. So I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and then even sometimes people think that even that staff member shouldn't get 50 or 100,000 for doing what they do. They should volunteer, but in reality, you want skilled people to work at charities, and people have to be paid for what they do, right? Because we all have to eat and make a living. So yes, charities spend money on admin, but that aside, what do charities need? They need money, because that's how they fund their social programs. So we want to help charities get more money, and then finance is a tool to do that. And finance is a way to take small amounts of money and to make them into bigger amounts of money, because we talked about that investing component. So charities are often focused on hand to mouth. How much can they raise in the next quarter to fund their capital campaign? And they're always focused on soliciting those donations. If they could learn to sort of invest in themselves, and finance can be a way to do that, then they can really build these huge amounts. Without going into too much detail, life insurance on the donor so that then when they pass away, they leave that charity a huge gift. That can be a way to really magnify the amount they leave behind for charity. Because as you know, with life insurance, we put in a certain amount, and then when we do pass away, that payoff is very large. So that can create lots of legacy gifts for those charities if they can sort of think more in the future. And that's really the challenge, is to get charities thinking about how do we create more in the future and not focus so much on the now.
Yeah, it's all about investing for today, for tomorrow. And basically, you want to take that profit and use it for good, social good, environment. And then also, especially in the West, where the media portray the ultra elite and wealthy and, these yachts, but we're talking responsible investing, achieve a win-win scenario for our portfolios. And so talk a little bit about the tenets of responsible investing.
Responsible investing, but I would say going back to those 3 Ps, so the people, the portfolio, and the planet, and just that people want more from what they do today. Just like you mentioned, people willing to pay double for the price of a cup of coffee that supports those causes. Really fundamental. And we're going back to what is the value add. I think that is the value add that I can bring, is just helping connect people in the community, and then connect charities to clients even, and help those charities and clients work together. For example, one client, we actually noticed on her tax returns that she had been giving to the Kidney Foundation year after year. And we asked about that, right? Would you be okay to share about that? And it turned out that her aunt got a kidney from her mom, which saved her aunt's life. And so that's really impactful part of our work, is learning about those kind of things that tie everyone together. And so we connected her with a Kidney Foundation, and she became an even bigger supporter of them, and found a way to do that with the limited resources she had. And she was in tears with the gift that she could create. So I would say that, yeah, those are the things that are really impactful about what we do, is creating those human connections and creating more for everybody. So when we say win-win, we're not looking at what can I gain and what can you lose. We're looking at how do we both gain.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so great to see people in the financial industry actually start to talk about giving back, being responsible, away from, greed and corruption and, all these scandals. So it's very refreshing to see somebody talk about using finances in a good way, as opposed to just hoarding and consuming and, showing off and etc. The other thing is that you're very active in is you're helping moms and dads create a solid plan for their family's financial future. Why can't the schools do this? That's one of the big questions I've always had.
Schools seem to be very conservative, just because education is run by the government for the most part, and the government is run by bureaucrats who are pretty conservative. I don't think education has evolved too much. They're starting to teach a little bit of personal finance in schools, but it's not really a focus. Yeah, my kids learned for 3 months about the fur trade in Canada and the US. That's like talking 300 years ago. Is that really something you want to spend 3 months on? I don't know. So yeah, I don't quite have the resources to answer that question, why we're not doing more in schools. But I will say, why moms and dads? Because when you're a parent, especially in an expensive city like Vancouver, then there's a lot of competing priorities. You want to put your kid in sports, you have to pay all the daily needs, plus your kid might need braces. All kids kind of need some kind of supplementary here and there, and then the vacations that you want to go on. So there's all those kind of things that add up. And then in addition to that, how do you save for your kids' university and college? And how do you save for yourselves in your own retirement? So there are all those challenges. So juggling all that is something I help parents do, and juggling those priorities. And then also, learning about all the options available, because there's a lot of government grants available that people don't know about. So all families need to do sometimes is just apply for these grants, and they can get free money from the government to fund their education plan or to supplement their income. So just letting people know. That's why we say knowledge is power, because if you teach people these things, they then have those tools in their toolbox to be able to do more. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a joke among we had a joke here where the modern educational school system here in the state designed by the industrialists to put people in factories. It was kind of designed to train them to work in factories, and it hasn't changed much since. So it's on us to really get that financial literacy and our financial freedom and learn how money works, the fractional reserve, how credit, debt, income, all that. So the other thing is that's talking about is so you have you're a financial advisor. You also, what is the abundance wealth community, and how can people check out your work, visit your website, contact you, your social media, and so on?
Abundance Wealth Community is my company and my website as well. And the meaning behind that, well, abundance refers to what I believe is abundant in the world. Like there's enough food, water, air, land, even money for everyone. It's just that sometimes we have these limiting beliefs, right? Like we think there's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough land. And I really believe that we can create our future, create what we want, and there's enough for everyone. So that's getting people to buy into that abundance mindset as opposed to the scarcity or lack mindset.
Yeah.
And the wealth means I want to bring everyone up to the same standard of living. So you and I and everyone else on the street deserve 3 meals a day, a roof over our heads, decent medical care, education, as those are like our basic rights. And community is what ties us all together. So it's relationships that are our superpower as human beings. It's all about relationship, right? Do you ever read those old comics from like the 70s or 60s? Did you ever bump into any of them? My brother had a big stack of them. And then there was always these funny science fiction things. So there was a evil wish machine, and a guy came across this wish machine, and he wished for the most money in the world. And then what the evil wish machine did is teleport him to a distant galaxy on this remote planet where he was the only person there with a huge pile of gold and jewels and cash. So think about like how absurd that is, but also think about like how important relationships are to us. Because it's not, money is just that tool to help us do what we want to do, but in the end, it doesn't have any meaning by itself. It's what gives us our meaning is those relationships, that community. And so I'm practicing here in Vancouver, BC. So I do help clients in Canada. Based on my licensing, it would have to be, if I'm going to help you with an actual plan, that you're a Canadian resident. In terms of people around the world, I'm happy to connect with anyone for phone call or email if you have questions, because what I'm here to do is provide that education. So I don't charge for my time. I'm more than happy to share that. Or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and even on my website, you can subscribe to my newsletter. I love to share about financial stuff in a way that's fun, relatable, and for the layperson. So I don't use a lot of those jargon or complex terms. I want to make it understandable. Yeah, and abundancewealthcommunity.com is my website. Feel free to check it out.
Yeah. And it reminds me of saying my mentor once said it, money is just basically these days it's a number on a screen now. And it used to be paper and ink. So it's basically energy, potential energy used to help people. You can do a lot of good things, basic living. This idea of wealth, also wealth versus, richness. Typically in the West, we're conditioned, wealth is status and income and, the size of your house and all of that. But, really wealth is time and health and, that type of abundance and freedom. So really interesting to delineate and really interesting to talk. I love talking financial literacy. And that's one of my passions. And for all the listeners out there listening, Max for coming onto the show and sharing his knowledge and wisdom. All of his resources and work will be in the links and show notes. He's on LinkedIn, Instagram, and other platforms. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you for having me today, Chris. It was great joining your show.